Well, I hope you enjoyed that tour around town from 400 feet. A little something different there. This is a look out to the east, and we can see a couple of towers. The one on the left is 80 miles away. The one on the right is 100 miles away. And let's take a look at that on the satellite. And there it is. You can see Dallas right there. Shreveport is located there, and Waco is here. We're in this area, and yeah, these are almost all the way out to Louisiana. Kind of a quiet weather pattern. Southerly flow just about everywhere, and these are just kind of weak boundaries hanging around the East Texas area. Here's the weather picture across the U.S. this afternoon. We've got that polar front just hanging around the Dakotas, Wyoming, Central Rockies, and it's been there the past 3 days or so. Still got high pressure there in the Great Basin and up in the Pacific Northwest, and that's given us a northerly flow across the deserts of Nevada and Utah. Also, part of this stubborn weather pattern, high pressure in the Great Lakes. And it's not just concentrated in the Great Lakes. Look at the isobars. Look at how extensive the anticyclonic pattern is. This is affecting everything from Minnesota all the way down to Texas. And even though we don't have a northeasterly flow in Texas, we're getting just kind of like a trickle of easterly flow in parts of Louisiana. And of course, some of that works its way into North Texas and drops the dew points. So instead of 70s dew points, we're seeing low 60s dew points. In fact, you have to go pretty much down to the Rio Grande to pick up the better moisture. And that, of course, has an effect on the weather throughout the Great Plains. Also, another stagnant weather pattern is this system hanging off the Carolinas coast. It's been there a while, and with it, that trailing front out towards Mississippi and Louisiana. So it's pretty similar to yesterday. However, temperatures, yeah, those are way up there. We're 91 at our location, but you go up to Minnesota, 93, and we've even got 96 there at Fargo. And it doesn't get any better as you get north. Look at that, 91 there in western Ontario, and even Moosonee along James Bay, 91 degrees. And that's very marshy terrain. I think they call that muskeg. It's kind of like waterlogged terrain, so obviously they're probably getting very uncomfortable conditions there, and I'm sure the mosquitoes are really going to town today. And it's interesting, you go a little bit to the north from 91 to 39 up there at Fort Severn. Quite a change. Yeah, 30s up there, so wow, I mean, that's a contrast like we see in Texas during the early spring. And so that sets the stage for very strong baroclinicity in Manitoba and Western Ontario. Also, getting some of the heat, New Brunswick. That's way off the edge of the map. We hardly ever talk about the Maritimes, but might as well. Yeah, there it is, 90 degrees there at whatever town that is in New Brunswick. So they're getting the heat, and that's marking the location of that warm front. And I should have drawn this part here as a occluded front, but I'd already drawn that before I realized what was going on. And let's take a look up in the Arctic, since some of our weather has come from there. Wow, 70 degrees up there in the Arctic Ocean. So yeah, that heat is here and there. All right, before we get too much further, there is going to be a change coming up next week, a temporary change. That'll benefit our supporters, and we'll talk about that at the very end of the webcast. Taking a look at conditions around the southwestern U.S., it looks like the marine layer has made it into the Los Angeles area. Yeah, you can pretty much make out the valleys. There's Los Angeles, there's San Bernardino, there's San Diego. So those clouds are just right up there to the coastal ranges. Not so much into the San Francisco area. It's actually very dry across much of the desert southwest. Earlier we were looking at what looked like maybe the monsoon starting up in New Mexico, but looks like we're back to the ridge. Of course, this is kind of early for the monsoon, so I would expect maybe in a few weeks we'll start to see the moisture flooding back in. It's usually New Mexico that gets hit first, usually around this time of the month up to late June. It gets started in places like El Paso and Albuquerque, and then we see it progressively working westward during the month of July. And usually by the end of July, it's already made it into places like Phoenix and Tucson. And at this time, I do see a couple forest fires out there in the southern Rockies. Here's the picture in the northwestern U.S. Once again, it looks like evidence of mountain waves. Lower cloud up in Wyoming and higher cloud down there in Colorado. This is mostly cirriform in this area. And that does kind of paint out the location of the jet somewhere in this region. We know from the surface map there's a front running about like that, and we would expect the jet stream to be pretty close to that region. It doesn't look like a whole lot of moisture has worked into the Great Plains, just a very scarce area of low clouds right there around Pierre. You can see it's pretty dry. The subtropical high keeping things shut down in Kansas and Nebraska. But as we go on through the afternoon, it looks like some of that Q comes together, and we may have just enough moisture to trigger convection later this afternoon. And up to the north, we see evidence of the upper level system. Remember, yesterday it was in Washington. It looks like that may have drifted east there. And I can see that cyclonic circulation, the clouds kind of spinning like that. So it appears our upper level low is somewhere around Yellowstone. And that's actually a pretty good thunderstorm right there. I guess that'd be around Gillette or Sheridan. Can't really remember the name of those towns too well, but yeah, right in that area, that looks like a pretty good cumulonimbus cloud. There's the northeastern U.S. Pretty obvious that they're under high pressure still. As we go west, we get into some of the tropical air. Dew points come up, and so does the temperature. And around Chicago and Milwaukee, you can see the lake effect right there. The summertime lake effect, sea breeze, bringing some stable conditions into the coastal areas and some cooler weather. Yeah, and that's about it. We do know it's pretty hot up there in New Brunswick, so. All right, let's check out the southeast U.S. And there it is, kind of stormy. We do know that the surface low is offshore, and aloft we've got our upper level low, and that's located right around western North Carolina. And to the northeast of that low looks like some storms going up. Kind of looks like they're embedded. And we've got a lot of towering cumulus across the southeastern U.S., and that's because we got the cold air coming south. You get that air mass modification, warmer conditions beneath colder air in the mid-levels, and that means steep lapse rates. So the conditions are unstable, and we get a lot of towering cumulus. The thing is, it's pretty uncapped. So that means we get numerous cells going up. And we can probably take a look at SPC to see the extent of the thunderstorms, and it looks like we're mostly looking at, looks like it's from Atlanta up the Appalachians to Washington, D.C., and then around Norfolk we've got a marginal risk. So why don't we have thunderstorms in Alabama? I mean, we saw that towering cumulus on the satellite. Well, the dew point chart kind of gives you some indication. Let's bring this up to the current time. Notice that it's 12Z. You always have to look at this stuff so you don't get thrown a loop there. So 21Z, that's about current. And we look at the scale and we can see that green, well, the lighter green is 45 to 50, and the blue is where we pick up 60 and above. So it looks kind of patchy. That kind of tells me maybe there's dry air being carried to the surface, residual moisture in place, probably being carried into the mid-levels. So patches of 60 right there with patches of like 50 and 55 down to the south. So let's sample some of our better parcels, like right around there in western Alabama. What does that look like? Well, yeah, we do see probably just barely enough for some showers. You can see the capes are up there about 500 to 1,000, which is light to moderate. However, it also is capped in the mid-levels. We do have the cold air. We can see that's centered around 700 to 800 millibars. That's helping to give us the lapse rates down beneath that. But as the towers go up, they stratify around 10 to 12,000 feet. Also, in the drier areas, that's going to be too stable for any deep convection. So you might see a little bit of pancake cumulus right there, stratocumulus, but very little vertical development. And there's that warm air just kind of lurking up there aloft. And I think that warm air is the result of differential advection. The origin of this air is probably from the central U.S. and the Great Plains. This air, between 5 and 10,000 feet, 12,000 feet or so, that's probably originating from the Great Lakes. Even though it shows westerly winds there, we know that the flow has been coming from the north over the past few days. And then below that, we've got some fresher cold air that's advected in from Kentucky and Ohio. And I think another thing worth pointing out is because we're involving air masses at different layers, I think this is probably the top of the frontal zone. This is the transition area. So up here, that's your tropical air. Down beneath, that's your modified polar air. So the polar air mass, that's about 4 kilometers deep. All right, so yeah, that's some pretty interesting stuff to look at there. Okay, let's take a quick look at our forecast. We're going to do something a little bit different and use the European model. The European model has actually done pretty well this season. Let's see what we're looking at. The only downside is, for some reason, we're missing the thickness plot. But we can go ahead and move forward and see what we're looking at. All right, thunderstorms there in North Dakota this evening. And looks like that frontal system just kind of presses eastward into Nebraska. Looks like some good storms up there in northern Ontario. And let's see if we have a dew point plot, actually. Okay, we might come back to that a little bit later. All right, for Thursday, thunderstorms going up west of Minneapolis down to the Lincoln, Nebraska area. Now, as that front comes southward during the day on Friday, looks like we're going to get some forcing. And with the stronger flow coming in from the central Rockies, we're probably looking at thunderstorms there in southwestern Kansas and also in southeastern Colorado. And so we get the development of a moderate MCS overnight there in Kansas, dying out towards 18Z. And then we get redevelopment Friday in southwestern Kansas and the Oklahoma Panhandles. So again, this is the European solution, and I think we're going to put that front kind of like right there, according to the European model. And I think the dry line is also active. Probably going to be running something like that. Usually as the upper level flow becomes more active, the dry line tends to venture further off the caprock, and that's probably what's happening here. So thunderstorms around Altus. Let's see if we can get a skew-t earlier in the day. Nope, no skew-t. We'll have to go to the GFS for that. Then let's see, overnight. Yeah, kind of an MCS across Kansas and northern Oklahoma. And then resetting things for the day on Saturday. Looks like some early convection, 18Z. That's going to be about 1 p.m. So I guess there's not a whole lot of capping, according to the European model. And the front pushes south. Thunderstorm activity does not look very extensive. So I wonder if there's some ridging passing over. And in fact, by 6Z, there's nothing. All right. Well, anyway, we know that there is that boundary kind of hanging around this area here. So that might be what's causing some of that stuff there during the day on Sunday. And then let's see, 1 MCS across Kansas Sunday night, and then Monday, not much going on. And let's look for the next big change, go forward into the upcoming week. Kind of a fast-moving Pacific system there into the Great Lakes, and that lays down a boundary and more stuff for Kansas. And you notice it gets a little bit drier there up in the Dakotas. Then towards the end of next week, yeah, stagnant boundary down there, and looks like some sort of tropical disturbance down there in Texas. Yeah, that's a system. I'm going backwards. Yeah, see, that's coming out of Mexico around Tuesday or Wednesday. So we're going to look for that to come north, and now I'm going to run it forward Wednesday and then Thursday, and you can see that moving up into Texas. So it could be kind of wet there in about a week. Okay, so yeah, we've got a little weather to look forward to. Let's check out the GFS solution for Friday and Saturday. Kind of compare notes there. So now we're looking at the GFS. Let's go up to Thursday evening. Yeah, stuff up to the north. That's similar to the European model. Then for Friday, there's the morning. Early convection. Guess that's a weak MCS that probably moved through. Yeah, there's the new development. It looks like the GFS is more aggressive in developing it down the dry line. And it doesn't have the dry line so far off to Caprock either. So a couple of differences there in the models. And then let's see for Saturday. Kind of a drier outlook there. Stuff developing along the boundary there in western Oklahoma. And looks like kind of a weak MCS moving down towards Dallas. Saturday night. Then mostly gone by Sunday morning. All right, any other surprises? Yeah, let's see if it catches that tropical stuff coming out of Mexico. We look down to the south. Check that out. Nope, not really. In fact, it's really going for some ridging. See those isobars showing cool air out in the Gulf? That's probably pushing that tropical disturbance back out into the interior of Mexico. All right, so yeah, we'll see how that resolves itself. I should keep a log book. I need to start a notebook and kind of keep notes on the performance. In fact, I got a calendar on the wall. I'm probably going to make notes, and that way, when we get up to next week, I'll be able to look back and say, the European model did better, or the GFS did better. We'll see. Anyway, yeah, at the very end here on the 30th, this is interesting. Look at the thickness. The red lines, yeah, look at that thickness. That's weird. Big old cold air mass over the western U.S. and another big bubble across the Great Lakes. Now, that could be the cold bias of the GFS, but there's no way to know. I mean, this is almost 360 hours out, so we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay, that brings us to the end of another show. And what about that change for next week? What we're going to do is a supporter-only week. Out of all the regular viewers we have, only about 20% are supporters. And really, I want to do something special for y'all. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take a break over the weekend because I really need to get caught up on stuff. This has been kind of an ongoing problem. And then for next week, we're going to have shows just for the supporters. And we'll have some special content and maybe a few tutorials. And that'll be just for our supporters. If you want to get in on that, here's our Patreon link. You can take care of that and we will get you all set up. Otherwise, we will be back on the 30th after our final show this week on the 19th. Okay, so that's about all I got for this evening. We'll be back again tomorrow and on Friday. So we'll see you then. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.